Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Pakistan. This is Haider Mehdi, and this is Voice of Free Pakistan for Pakistanis living outside and inside Pakistan. We're continuing our series on the Syrian crisis and the Syrian development, and because this is very important for what's going to happen in the region and especially in its effects on Pakistan. And today we've invited somebody who has worked very hard and diligently in following up on what's happening in Syria, has also reported extensively on the Ukraine crisis, on the Palestinian crisis, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming Dimitri Lascaris on our program. Good morning, Dimitri, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, my friend. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, and just for many of us, my viewers know about you, but I just want to give a sense of who you are and why you're here. And just to give you a background, viewers, Dimitri is a lawyer and journalist and a geopolitical commentator based in Montreal, Canada, and Kalamata, Greece. After graduating from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law in the 90s, Dimitri started his legal career at the Wall Street law firm Sullivan and Cromwell. In 2004, he returned to Canada from the US. Since then, he has prosecuted dozens of securities fraud class actions against major Canadian and multinational corporations, has recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for defrauded investors. Well done, Dimitri. Dimitri was named by the Canadian Lawyer magazine as one of the 25 most influential lawyers in Canada and by Canadian Business magazine as one of the 50 most influential persons in Canadian business. For 10 years, while practicing law, Dimitri served as a board member and a correspondent of the Real News Network in Baltimore, Maryland. He's now a freelance journalist whose reporting focuses on Western government, and he has his own YouTube channel, Reason to Resist. Wonderful. That's amazing. I was wondering why a lawyer is doing what you're doing. So perhaps in about a minute, explain why law and now why Reason to Resist. And then we'll go on to the program.
I became a lawyer mostly because my parents wanted me to, but it turned out to be the right decision for me personally, for my family, and for my career. I do what I do now, which is principally journalism and pro bono legal work, because although I did come from a very humble background, my parents were poor Greek immigrants who came over to Canada from the 1950s. I have had a relatively privileged life, thanks largely to the practice of law. And I feel that at this stage of my life, when my mind is still relatively functional, and I have the ability to help those who are oppressed, that's my duty. It's as simple as that. It's the least that I can do in light of the good fortune that I've had in my life.
I love this phrase that you have here: disrupt the powerful, allow them no peace. Thank you so much for this insight about yourself. I noticed you've also done a program on Pakistan a few days ago. I was watching it, and perhaps at the end, if you have time, we will ask you about something that perhaps you may help us do with reference to Pakistan, what's going on, but to Syria. So, Dimitri, what's going on?
A terrorist organization with the full backing of Turkey, the United States, and Israel has seized power. That's pretty much, in a nutshell, what has transpired. The rebranded Alqaeda, which now goes by the acronym of HTS, has been accused with complete justification by Western governments, including the United States government, of engaging in such atrocities as rape, torture, extrajudicial assassinations, and suicide bombings, including one suicide bombing, or it may have been more than one, in Damascus in, I believe it was 2017, which killed over 70 people, including 8 children. And you know where you can find this out? By going to the Canadian government website. There you will see under its list of terrorist organizations, HTS, and it describes the suicide bombing that I just referred to, amongst others. The allegations of rape and torture, you can find that on the website of the United States State Department, where It recounts in gory detail the crimes of this entity. The CIA has a $10 million bounty on the head of the leader, al-Julani. Now, there really is no reason to believe that suddenly on the way to Damascus, al-Julani and his followers had a transformation and became virtuous, became Democrats, became inclusive. But let's assume that's the case. There's no reason to believe it. It's almost certainly not true. And in fact, there have been reports emerging from Syria already of Christians being beheaded, of Alawites being summarily executed, and so on. But let's assume that in fact it's true, that he's been transformed. When do you give terrorists a free pass because they suddenly woke up one morning and had a conscience? Would we confer the same treatment upon the enemies of Israel, groups like Hamas, groups like the Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah, if suddenly their leaders woke up one day and said, you know, we've decided we're going to become inclusive and democratic, would we forgive them for all that they allegedly did? I really doubt that. Whatever happened to accountability, whatever happened to being held, being made to suffer a penalty for the immense suffering you've imposed upon others. There's a basic principle of our justice system, and it appears that Western governments are prepared to flush it down the toilet for the sake of political expediency.
So that's really the next question then. Why have they rebranded HTS and put, as the cradle says, put lipstick on a pig as far as al-Julani is concerned? What are the long-term plans that they have?
Well, I don't know that they have any long-term plans. These people, I stopped believing a long time ago that Western governments and their proxies have any kind of a sensible long-term vision. I think the immediate answer is that al-Julani is not going to, and he's being quite clear about this, is not going to resist American or Israeli hegemony in the region. Even as we speak, Israel is bombing Syria, is stealing more and more of its land, is openly announcing its intention to colonize that newly stolen land. In fact, the German government, which is supposed to be a champion of human rights and international law, just issued a toothless statement urging Israel not to carry out its stated intention of building colonies on this newly stolen Syrian land. Of course, Israel will thumb its nose at Germany. Germany knows this, and Germany will do nothing. It won't impose any sanctions as it has done on Russia. It won't stop sending weapons to Israel, and Israel will get away with it. Now, the consequences in the longer run, I don't think anybody can say with a high level of confidence what those are going to be. I mean, we are really in uncharted territory here. A terrorist organization has seized the levers of state. That state is being carved up and bombed relentlessly after years of crushing sanctions and brutal warfare. We are talking about a potentially explosive situation, which could easily have spillover effects into neighboring countries. Thank you for putting up that map. You can see, Turkey, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel all border upon Syria, or what remains of Syria. Syria is in the heart of the world's richest oil-producing region, where there is already tremendous amounts of tension and conflict because of Israel's ongoing genocide, amongst other things, its destruction of South Lebanon. So the last thing you need right now, in order to stabilize this potentially disastrous situation, is to empower a terrorist organization to take over the levers of the Syrian state. Where this can go, these people, they may well harbor some delusion that they can control the outcome, but I don't believe that they can. And this could end up coming back to haunt them as much as anybody.
So, Dimitri, is there a one-off project where this terrorist organization, Al-Qaeda, Daesh, was allowed to take over Syria so Israel could occupy the Golan Heights and stop Iran from supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and stop its land traffic?
Right. Well,
or is it something more beyond that and other countries are going to be targeted?
Well, I think from Israel's perspective, is it precisely what you just identified. The objective for Israel is to steal more Syrian land and permanently occupy it, colonize it. and cut off the flow of weapons from Iran through Iraq and Syria to Hezbollah. And for the time being, Israel has achieved that objective. But as I say, where this all goes, who can say at this stage with any confidence? From Turkey's perspective, I think this had very much to do, obviously, with increasing its control over what remains of Syria. Perhaps Erdogan has the intention of annexing parts of Syria, including the city of Aleppo. For some time, substantial parts of Syria, what is today Syria, were part of the Ottoman Empire. This is a man who is fundamentally colonial in nature. I'm talking here about Recep Erdogan. So for example, Cyprus, his troops have continued to occupy Cyprus, contrary to the will of the international community, and have absolutely no intention of surrendering it. So we've seen from his past behavior that he has very much a colonial mindset. The United States ultimately wants the oil, wants the resources of Syria, and above all, wants to maintain hegemony throughout this extraordinarily important region, both in terms of its resources, in terms of West Asia is the nexus between Asia, Africa, and Europe. The trade routes there are extraordinarily important. So having control over this region confers upon a state a tremendous ability to impose its will on the global community. And that's precisely what the United States is trying to accomplish here. The other thing I should mention is that there's a pipeline project which has been talked about for years and was being thwarted by Bashar al-Assad, that was supposed to run through Syria and then Turkey. And a Turkish minister recently revived the idea of this pipeline project, which would help Erdogan achieve his vision of turning Turkey into a gas hub, a major gas hub. So I think that certainly has something to do with it as well, although the Israelis, I think, want to pursue an alternate project which would run through Israel.
So I'm going to go into a conspiracy hat wearing role. What about this Greater Israel project? Do you feel that this is something that Israel and the USA are actually earnestly working towards?
It's important not to talk about any government really as a monolith. There are certainly powerful and influential people in Israeli and U.S. politics who want they're pursuing a vision of Greater Israel. One incident that happened shortly before the ceasefire in Lebanon, which I think was quite telling, was that this charlatan historian who was an Israeli settler was killed in South Lebanon when he was visiting an archaeological site with the chief of staff of the elite Golani brigade of the Israeli military. He was killed by Hezbollah militants who were guarding the site. And it later emerged, it was widely reported in the Israeli press, not so much in the West, that this man was there effectively to construct a narrative that South Lebanon was historically part of Greater Israel. He lives in the West Bank, by the way, or he did before he was killed in South Lebanon. Unfortunately, his name escapes me. I hadn't even heard of him before until I saw the reports of his death. But he's well known in Israel. As I've reported previously in my program, there are Israeli soldiers running around who are engaged in this genocide who are wearing Greater Israel patches on their uniforms. Ben-Gvir, the more extreme and outspoken members of Netanyahu's fascist cabinet, have been quite clear that their dream is the dream of Greater Israel. And right now their voices are in the ascendancy. But I also think that there are people inside the Israeli military who may be uncomfortable with this, not on a legal basis or a moral basis, but they're uncomfortable with it because they're concerned about the military implications of trying to, for example, steal more land from Jordan or steal land from Egypt, which is part of the Greater Israel project. So I think that debate will continue inside the hierarchy of the Israeli government. But as I say, for now, the Greater Israelites, they appear to be in ascendancy and dominating the debate. And of course, there are people who think this way in the United States government as well. Hardcore fanatical Zionists who want to see Israel expanded dramatically.
Thank you, Dimitri. Talking about the neighboring Arab countries, Turkey you've already mentioned. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE, and the others who have actively supported uh, Al Julani, actively supported Israel and the US in this takeover of Syria. Why did they do that? What was their long term interest in this?
Well, I think let's take the case of Qatar. Qatar was, I believe, one of these parties that was pushing for this pipeline project to go through Syria.
Mhm.
So they had that motivation, but mostly it's that these governments are simply vassals of the United States. They're not interested in the survival or well-being of the Palestinian people, not in principle. And they certainly don't care about the ordinary citizens in their own countries. Their purpose is to enrich themselves by serving their masters in Washington. And they've been made fabulously wealthy by doing that. You know, the so-called royal family of Saudi Arabia, the emirs of UAE and so forth are among the wealthiest people in the world. They didn't get that way by merit. They got that way because the U.S. military empowers them to steal the resources and wealth of their own country and their own people. And ultimately, their objective is to serve Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam wants Bashar al-Assad out and somebody in power in Damascus who will do the bidding of the United States government.
So there is personal self-interest. There is interest in remaining in power because they're not elected. They're just families who happen to be brigands and taken over lands. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, all these guys. So where does it leave now the Palestinian cause, where Iran, which was really the spearhead of fighting for the Palestinians, now in a relatively weaker position? Where does it leave the Palestinian cause?
This is an extremely important question, and certainly one of the most troubling questions in all of this, given that they are being subjected, the Palestinian people, to an ongoing genocide. You know, I've heard a lot of doomsday commentary amongst people who support the Palestinian cause. And I think, first of all, we need to take a deep breath and understand that in every resistance struggle, there are setbacks. In every war, there are setbacks. And this is undoubtedly a setback. But what has not changed? What has not changed is that Iran, which has always been by far the most powerful member of the axis of resistance, retains the ability to inflict very serious damage on Israel by means of its hypersonic missiles. And it also has formidable air defenses. That remains true. The leadership of Ansar Allah in Yemen, which has effectively destroyed the business in the Israeli port of Eilat, the Red Sea port of Eilat, causing its port to declare bankruptcy, they continue to prevent complicit ships from passing through the Red Sea. They continue to fire missiles and drones at military targets in Israel. The popular militias in Iraq remain active against Israel. Hezbollah is still a potent fighting force. I think we should assume, because it's rational to do so, that Hezbollah had the foresight over the years to develop some capacity to produce weaponry locally. And I suspect they have weapons production facilities that are deep underground and that have not yet been touched by Israel's bombardment of Lebanon. But the real problem is that the more powerful and accurate of the missiles that were in Hezbollah's arsenal, it's going to be very difficult for Hezbollah to be supplied with that type of weaponry. They could still, with what they have, effectively repel, as they have done now repeatedly, an invasion, a ground invasion of South Lebanon. But are they going to be able in the future to pose more of a threat to the Zionist entity than that? And I think that's a serious question. I saw an interview recently with former CIA officer Larry Johnson, who was talking about this very question about the resupply of Hezbollah. And he said, you know, it remains to be seen whether or not the flow of weapons has been cut off, because, for example, it may be possible for Iran to establish smuggling routes by land. And if you think about it, it's sad to say, but you know, if you're dealing with a deeply impoverished country where there's no effective central government, and the Iranian government is willing to compensate people handsomely for transferring weapons by land from Iraq to Lebanon, there probably will be some opportunities for it to do that. So while this is a significant blow, it's not by no means a mortal blow. And the Palestinians, to their immense credit, continue to this very day to put up resistance in Gaza and in the West Bank. And frankly, I personally regard this as one of the most heroic displays of resistance in all of human history, what we're witnessing today.
And where does it leave Hamas, Dimitri?
Hamas is always been in a very precarious situation because of the efforts made to destroy it. I don't, there's been a lot of chatter amongst those who support the Palestinian cause. One person who's been very outspoken about this, by the way, is Scott Ritter, about the fact that Hamas appears to have embraced the downfall of Bashar al-Assad and the seizure of power by HTS. I don't know what to make of all of that, but I would say that Hamas is in a very difficult position. It understands undoubtedly what its vulnerabilities are. It has always, for example, as far as I can tell, maintained a cordial relationship with the dictator in Egypt, even though he is deeply complicit in the siege on Gaza and has been for many years. They're very cordial in their relations with Qatar, even though Qatar hosts the largest U.S. military base in West Asia and is obviously a vassal of the United States. So I think the response to the seizure of power by HTS coming out of Hamas may just be a pragmatic attempt to maintain some kind of a cordial relationship and perhaps leave open the possibility that one day HTS will become supportive of the Palestinian people. I wouldn't attach too much importance to any of that. What I do think, is of much more immediate concern to Hamas must be is that what the little that remains of Gaza is being systematically destroyed by Israel, and the West is doing absolutely nothing about it. The West continues to empower Israel, to arm Israel, to protect Israel from legal action. And that, I'm sure, is what is primarily concerning all the people in Gaza, not just Hamas.
Interesting. Just moving a little north and perhaps east. Was there a quid pro quo between Russia and the US over Syria? So leave Syria and we'll let you do whatever you want in Ukraine.
Well, I've seen no direct evidence to support that. I've heard people make that argument, including some geopolitical commentators I respect. There's no direct evidence to support it. There's at best some circumstantial evidence. Now, is Vladimir Putin, based on his record, capable of doing a deal like that? Yes, I think he is capable of doing a deal like that because the man has always prioritized, he's not shy about saying this, the interests of the Russian Federation. That's what he's primarily concerned about. That's what he considers his job to promote, the interests of the Russian Federation. So if he could secure permanent sovereignty over the oblasts in Ukraine that Russia has annexed by not resisting the seizure of power by HTS, which is, as I mentioned, the Western proxy, he probably in principle would be willing to do that. The problem I have with this interpretation of the events is that it requires us to believe that Putin trusts the American government to keep its end of the deal. I just don't believe that Putin trusts the American government to do that. So basically, I mean, what we're being, those who propose, who argue for this interpretation of the events, what they're asking us to believe is that Russia would say, sure, you can take over the government in Damascus, occupy all of Syria, either through your Turkish proxy or your Israeli proxy or directly as the Americans are doing in the northeast of the country. So the situation is now essentially irreversible. There's nothing Russia can do, practically speaking, unless it's willing to sacrifice enormous numbers of its soldiers, become involved in a major war in a quagmire, which is far from its own shores, simply not consistent with its own behavior. So would it do that without some ironclad guarantee that it's going to get its end of the bargain when the Trump comes to power? I don't believe it. I find that implausible in the extreme because the United States government has lied so many times to so many governments that it has absolutely no credibility left.
So last two questions, and we're coming to the end, and thank you so much for this. Will this force Iran to go nuclear again?
I look, if I were the leader of Iran, that's exactly what I would do. I would do it reluctantly, with great sadness that it came to this. But what else are we to infer from the behavior of the West and Israel than their ultimate target is Iran, and that the only way they can stop attacking Iran is for Iran's government to become, another vassal of the United States and surrender all sovereignty. The Americans already back in the 1950s with the British overthrew a democratically elected president in Iran and installed the corrupt and brutal Shah for many years to oppress the Iranian people. This is what led ultimately the major contributing factor to the Islamic Revolution in Iran. They've been killing Iranian scientists. They've killed Iranian military personnel who were in Syria at the invitation of the internationally recognized government. They destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus. The Israelis did. There's no crime that they won't commit in order to overthrow a government in Iran which refuses to do the bidding of Washington. So what other deterrent do they have at the end of the day? And now there's open talk about the fact that the destruction of Syria's air defenses will make it easier for the Israeli Air Force to attack Iran. In the Israeli political discourse, they're openly talking about this. So all the signs are that they're going to attack Iran next. And North Korea has demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that possessing a nuclear weapon is a pretty powerful deterrent. It's managed to avoid being attacked by the United States all of these years precisely because it has a nuclear arsenal. So I think that may well be what comes of these various aggressions. And if that happens, if Iran does develop a nuclear weapon, this will instantly turn into a strategic disaster for the United States and Israel. Everything that they have done will have ended up making Israel profoundly less secure and less able to dominate the region.
Thank you. So thank you for this, Dimitri. So last two questions. Now this is Pakistan. Pakistan has a nuclear arsenal and on the sidelines of what's happening in the Middle East and West Asia. Do you think that has any significance for the developments that would have happened in Syria?
Well, I doubt that the Israelis or the Americans or even the Turks gave a second thought to what the government of Pakistan thinks about all of this. They don't care what anybody thinks about all of this. They don't care what the United Nations thinks about all of this. So why would they care what Pakistan thinks about it? In Pakistan, the current government has given no indication that this kind of behavior on the part of the United States and Israel is going to potentially elicit a nuclear attack from Pakistan. Now, if the Israelis attack Iran, and particularly if they do so with a nuclear weapon, which I think they are entirely capable of doing, I think there's a real question about what the Pakistani government is going to do. Not just because Iran is, a Muslim nation, not just because, there's a significant Shia population in Pakistan, but because the countries of Pakistan and Iran share a border. So I would, and the nuclear fallout, depending on where in particular the Israelis decide to strike Iran, if they did that, could potentially cause great harm to the people of Pakistan. So in that case, I don't know. I mean, there's a serious risk that there might be some kind of retaliatory action by the part of the Pakistani government. And I suspect that the Israelis have given some thought to that, as have the Americans. I don't think at the end of the day it's going to be the decisive factor in their determination whether or not to nuke Iran. But I would be very surprised if they haven't at least given some thought to that. As I say, the Pakistani government would have every reason to be alarmed and outraged, as would all governments, if Israel resorted to the nuclear option.
Well, the current government, and maybe there's a discussion for another, the current government in Pakistan is a military-imposed puppet regime, and they've aligned themselves fully, totally, completely with the US, with Israel. I mean, you cannot even take a Palestinian flag on the streets of Pakistan and protest for the Palestinians in Gaza. So nothing is expected from the current military regime in Pakistan. Certainly, the people of Pakistan would have reacted very differently. Certainly, Imran Khan would have reacted very, very differently. And perhaps that's one of the major reasons that he's where he is and why the Americans are supporting this fascist authoritarian military regime. But the last question then is there a possibility that the Canadian government will impose Magnitsky sanctions for crimes against humanity against General Asim Munir and the generals and people, the government in Pakistan who've really committed serious, horrendous crimes against humanity if this case is marshaled well? And I now defer to your lawyer hat.
Well, the current government of Canada, I don't think there's any prospect of that happening because, I mean, look at the case of Israel. You know, have they opposed any sanctions on Israel? None. Zero sanctions. Not even on Netanyahu and Gallant, both of whom have been indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity by the ICC. It has been found plausible by the International Court of Justice that Israel is committing genocide. Amnesty International, Western-based reputable human rights organization, just came out with a detailed report in which it concluded that Israel is committing genocide. Genocide is the worst crime against humanity that one can commit. And yet Canada has not imposed a single sanction on Israel. So why would it impose any sanctions on Pakistan if the government of Pakistan is doing the bidding of Washington? I don't think that there's any realistic prospect of that happening. Now, if we had a government in Canada that actually cared about human rights and international law, then sure. You know, unfortunately, we don't.
Dimitri Lascaris, what a pleasure having you. I hope we can continue these conversations as the weeks and months progress. I wish you well in your own program. I would urge Pakistanis who want an unbiased view of what's happening in Western governments, please do subscribe to Dimitri's. He hasn't told me this. This is of my own. Please subscribe to Dimitri's YouTube channel, Reason to Resist. I was introduced to you, Dimitri, through Dr. Zafar Mangish. Thanks to him. And I will be watching your channel with great interest. Thank you very much again and wish you all the best.
I wish you all the best as well, my friend. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Khuda Hafiz. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.